The girls at the store start making me one as soon as I walk in the front door. I guess I'm a creature of habit. I do get a few dirty looks from people waiting in line when one of the girls walks down the line and hands me my drink with a pleasant, "Good morning, Mr. Mitchell." Of course, the tip may help. It was a typical Hawaiian day. Not a cloud in the sky, the temperature in the mid-70s, and a mild breeze coming out of the west from the ocean. Actually, that's a dumb statement. Hawaii is an island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. No matter what direction the wind is coming from, it's always off the ocean. I sat outside at my small table under a palm tree. The palm provided just enough shade so I was safe from a nasty sunburn. My driver, Keanu, and I enjoyed the peace and tranquility. I was trying to read the Wall Street Journal while he was checking his eyelids for light leaks. But today, my mind kept wandering back over the last 5 years. Yep, it's been 5 years since my wife divorced me and took off with her lover. I was living in western New York State at the time, working as a computer nerd for a large manufacturing company. I wasn't the greatest tech employee there. In reality, I was a little lower than average. I didn't even try hard. I guess I wasn't the most ambitious rep they employed. To be exact, if I finished one job, I would just wait until the next job was assigned to me instead of looking for more work. I tended to hide a lot. As normal, I was surfing the web after finishing my last assigned task when my supervisor walked into my cubicle. He said the department manager wanted to see me. This was an unusual request and I felt just a little apprehensive. We walked to the elevators together to visit him. When my supervisor and I reached the big boss's office, Margaret, his secretary, asked us to take a seat. I believe she said, "Mr. Martin is on the phone and will see you shortly." Shortly turned out to be almost 30 minutes, the longest 30 minutes of my life. When we were finally escorted into his office, we weren't even offered a chair. "Jim, that's me," he started. "You have been an employee of this company for," he stopped to look at some paperwork on his desk, "15 years. I regret to inform you that your services are no longer required here. You will receive 1 year's severance, all your accrued vacation and personal time in your next paycheck." Well, that was it. I was fired. What the hell was I going to do now? I was too old to start all over again. What the hell was I going to tell Shalia, my wife? I thought as I packed my belongings in a box. I'm not really sure what the next couple of hours contained, but I found myself sitting in a bar having a double, actually my third or fourth double, when the bartender suggested that I had had enough and it was time to go home. I drove carefully home, no use getting a DWI arrest, I thought. I pulled into my garage and promptly drove partially through the rear wall. I guess my wife had some work done today that involved shortening the garage. Well, the noise should have brought her out to the garage, but it didn't. When I finally got to my feet and tried the door to the house, I found it unlocked. I opened the door to a completely empty kitchen. The table and chairs were gone, but even worse, all the kitchen appliances were also missing. The first thought entering my foggy mind was, we've been robbed. I staggered into the living room, and everything was gone. The room was as bare as it was when we first bought the house. My head was still a little slow, and I never noticed the pile of my stuff in the middle of the living room floor. I carefully climbed the stairs to the bedroom area and found everything missing. Well, not everything. All my clothes and stuff were thrown in a pile on the bedroom floor. The pile stunk. After a while, I realized that the smell was urine. As I got closer to the pile, the smell got stronger and stronger. In my drunken state, I vomited to culminate my day. I hit my clothes, went downstairs, and curled up on the carpet. I won't claim that I fell asleep. I think I just passed out. When I awoke the next morning, I had the world's biggest hangover. My head throbbed, my mouth tasted as if an army had marched through it, and my body was stiffer than a board from sleeping on the floor. I stumbled out to the garage and noticed my wife's car was gone. I staggered back to the kitchen, planning on fixing some coffee if there was any left. There wasn't. She took that too. It took a few minutes for my brain to engage a little more before I saw the note on the counter. I picked it up and started reading. "Jim, we have been married almost 14 years. In that length of time you have turned out to be a loser. You are not a good husband, a good provider, or a good lover. You are selfish and thought only of your wants and needs. I have moved my stuff out and into my lover's house. I will be contacting a lawyer to start divorce proceedings. Sheila. Well, I guess I knew where today was going. Sheila was a legal secretary for a large law firm. I suspected that she was planning to upgrade to one of the attorneys, as well as use the firm to gut me. Thank God we didn't have children. I was a little pissed, so I looked for the house phones. They were all gone. I still had my company's cell phone. They forgot to ask me for it. So, as a final act of defiance, I called the bank and reported that I had been mugged last night and that my wallet was stolen. A very helpful young lady froze all my credit cards and my checking and savings accounts. My debit card was stolen too. After I got off the phone, I was smiling. Boy, was Sheila going to be pissed when none of our joint cards worked. I packed my things into my car and took all the luggage. I couldn't even find any garbage bags. She took everything. One of the reasons my favorite watering hole was my favorite was that it was owned and operated by my best friend since childhood, the one person I trusted with my life. So, I went to his bar for advice. Bartenders always give the best advice. Besides, he had an ex-wife and might know a good divorce attorney. There was also the problem of hiding my final check. I didn't want Sheila to get it. Martin poured me a double as I walked into the barroom. After last night, I figured you could use one. He stated with great sympathy. I downed the glass in one gulp. He looked at me in shock. I really didn't drink that way. So, I told him my story from when I left his bar last night. When I got done, I had the name of his divorce attorney, an apartment over the bar, and an IOU equaling the amount of my severance check. He was going to include the check in one of his banking deposits and just steal out the money as I needed. Time went on and so did my divorce. A year later, I found myself divorced and living in a small one-bedroom apartment in a questionable neighborhood. My loving wife had hired a shark for a lawyer. Hell, she worked for the firm and I was cleaned out. She got the house, the 401k, the investment account, and the checking and savings accounts. However, she almost got alimony payments, but since I had no job or money, the judge took pity on me and forgave them. I still had the severance check. No one on her legal team thought to ask about it. It might sound as if my ex made out, but the house was upside down on a mortgage. The savings account had less than $1,000 in it. The checking account was almost empty from paying the monthly bills with no deposits, and the newly started 401k had less than $22,000 in it. And best of all, in my opinion, was the fact that most of the joint credit cards were near their max. It seems Sheila went on a spending spree before the divorce was final. I guess she planned on sticking me with the bill since I had no income at the time. The judge stuck her with them. I think it took a week to get the smile off my face. Eventually, I had to get a job. I wound up as a janitor in the school system working the night shift. My days consisted of either sitting at my computer or sitting at my friend's local bar. Guess what I did with my free time? When at the bar, I was on my way to becoming an alcoholic. One morning, I found a Powerball ticket in my pocket. I didn't remember buying it, but I did remember that the bar I favored sold them. I tossed the ticket on my desk and went to the bathroom. I did the 3 S's and started my morning coffee. I needed that wonderful elixir to feel human in the morning. Well, actually it was 1 p.m., but that was morning to me. When I got out of the shower, I waited for my PC to boot up. I noticed the Powerball ticket beckoning me, so once the PC started, I fired up Firefox and went to the Powerball site. I checked the numbers on the ticket 3 times. They matched the winners. I reread the webpage. There was only one winning ticket sold and it was worth $250 million. That's millions, folks. I grabbed a pen and quickly signed my name on the back of the ticket. My next item of business was to call the lawyer who represented me in the divorce. I got his answering machine. It was a Sunday. I left a detailed message asking him to call me. 2 hours later he called back. I guess he didn't have anything going on this Sunday either. I explained my win and I made an appointment for Monday. The next day we had a very long discussion about trusts, investments, tax avoidance, and most importantly, that my ex was not entitled to anything. It took almost a month to set up all the hidden bank accounts and take possession of the money. 2 weeks later I was looking at property in Hawaii. I wanted a fancy place on one of the hills near Hawaii Kai, a suburb of Honolulu. It took almost a year before I had the new place set up to my liking, but now I was finished and enjoying the good life. My favorite memory of this period was when I got a call from my lawyer. It seemed that my ex-wife wanted to talk. She had heard about my winnings. My lawyer shot her down. I knew there was something I liked about him. So there I was, sipping my frappé and enjoying my thoughts when I felt something. Did you ever have one of those funny feelings that you were being watched? I started to alert my driver. He was also my bodyguard when I looked around and spotted a little girl of about 5 or 6 standing there watching me. She had long dark hair and the prettiest blue eyes I had ever seen on a child, but they were very sad eyes. She had a small doll clutched to her chest and a small blanket under her nose. She tore at my heart and I wanted to just hug her and make all her problems go away. I looked at her and gave her my friendliest smile. There was no sense in frightening her with a dirty look. At the same time I looked for a hovering parent. No parent I knew would ever let their child wander around strangers. I widened my search. Still nothing. I got the attention of one of the counter girls and with some improvised sign language, I asked, "Who is she?" I watched as she asked the other counter girls and all I received in return for my efforts was a shrug of her shoulders. By now, I had attracted the attention of a couple of women sitting around the courtyard. As I surveyed them, they all shook their heads. No. By now, the little girl was scared. There were tears dripping from her eyes. I gave her my best smile and handed her my clean handkerchief. She took it and just stood there with it in her hand. I took her little hand and dried her eyes. For my efforts, I got a small smile and a dirty handkerchief. A couple of the women walked over to me and started talking to her. One of the women pulled out her cell phone and dialed 911. I heard her talk to the operator about a lost child. When she hung up, she turned to me and said, "5 minutes." The little girl started making small noises, so I started running my fingers through her hair. I gave her a soft little kiss on the top of her head. She looked at me and said, "Grazie, Papa." It had been 20 years, but I recognized the phrase. It was Italian for "thank you, grandfather." You see, in the late 1980s, I was stationed in Italy courtesy of the US Army. I picked up quite a bit of Italian while I was there. If a guy wanted to get close and personal with one of the bar girls, speaking the language was necessary. This little girl was speaking Italian. "Bella ciao. EIO, Jim." "Hi, beautiful." "My name is Jim," I said. I saw her eyes light up and a great big smile crossed her face. She hugged me tighter. "Bella, what is your name, beautiful?" I asked next. "Bella," she answered. Well, I tried a couple more times but got nothing different, so I decided to try another direction. "Aqua?" I asked. I got a little smile, so I took her hand and into the Starbucks we went. While we were looking at the cold drink cooler, one of the baristas whipped up a small caramel frappuccino and gave it to Bella. One sip and Bella was hooked. She gave the girl a big smile and said, "Grazie," a polite child. We walked back out to my table and Bella sat next to me and slowly drank her treat. I spotted the Honolulu police cruiser pull up at the curb and waved at the officers. They walked over to me and asked what was going on. I explained that Bella appeared to be either lost or abandoned. One of the officers started talking to Bella. He was nice and polite, but he was speaking English. I could see the frustration building in his face when his partner noticed the smile on my face. "Okay, do you know why she won't talk to us?" he asked. I nodded my head. "It appears that she only speaks Italian. My Italian is about 20 years old, so I can't get a lot out of her. Do you guys have anyone who speaks the language that you can call?" "Bathroom?" she asked. I motioned to one of the women sitting around the patio, pointed at Bella and said, "Bathroom." One of them came to my rescue, but Bella wouldn't go with the woman, so the three of us made the trip. I stayed out in the hall. Bella called me a couple of times just to make sure I was still there. When we got back to the table, I was informed that the police could not find anyone to speak Italian, so they called Child Protective Services, and a caseworker was coming. 2 hours later, the two cops, Bella and I, went to McDonald's for lunch. Bella knew exactly what she wanted and by pointing made her choices known. I bought lunch for the four of us. When we got back to Starbucks, a very angry caseworker was waiting for us. She started writing on the police officers. She bitched at them about wasting her time by forcing her to wait for us. Well, they weren't about to take any from her, so a shouting match started. Bella was getting scared, so I walked her away from all the noise. The caseworker saw me and started yelling that I was kidnapping the child and that I should be stopped. I pulled out my cell phone and started making calls. I had been a large contributor to the current governor's campaign fund. My thought process was that if I had given all that money, I might as well start getting a little benefit from it. I got one of the governor's underlings on the phone, explained who I was and what my problem was, and the reply was, "I'll take care of it." It took about 5 minutes when the caseworker's cell phone rang. She answered it very rudely and started yelling at whoever interrupted her, when suddenly she got very quiet. All I heard was a lot of yes from her end of the conversation. While she was listening, an unmarked police car pulled up. I recognized the man getting out of the car. It was the chief of police. He walked up to his officers and they went into conference. He then walked up to the caseworker and said, "Hang up the phone, get in your car, leave, and that's an order. If you fail to obey, I'll have you arrested." The caseworker left, and the chief walked over to my table with his 2 officers and introduced himself. "Did either of my officers act in any way discourteous during their interactions with you?" he asked. "No, sir. They were very polite and helpful. They are working to find a translator so that we can help the girl," I said. The 2 uniformed patrolmen smiled at me. The chief sat down at my table and we started discussing little Bella. The 2 officers returned to patrol duty, and the chief and I tried to decide what to do with my newfound friend. We decided that Bella would stay in my house until they found her parents or other relatives, and they would try to find an Italian translator. My driver had returned to my house. He wanted to do a little yard work, so I called home and requested pickup. We were going to be very busy that afternoon buying Bella a wardrobe of little girl clothes, so it was off to Ala Moana Mall for an afternoon of shopping. My driver's wife was also my housekeeper and cook, so I asked if he could bring her along to help pick out Bella's outfits. Keanu, my driver, and his wife Alani showed up about 15 minutes later. Alani spent the whole trip to the mall quizzing me all about Bella. When we got to the mall, the girls visited all the children's stores while Keanu and I just made trip after trip back to the car with packages. If I remember correctly, we visited the Disney store, Gap Kids, Gymboree, Janie and Jack, Pitter Patter, and the Children's Place. We didn't exactly buy something in every store, but it wasn't for lack of trying. My American Express got a real workout. Bella and Alani became the best of friends. They chattered back and forth to each other, neither understanding what the other was saying, but that didn't stop them. They shared the universal language of women shopping, that's all they needed. I don't remember which store was selling children's bedroom furniture, but both of them stopped and stared at all the little girls' bedroom items. We didn't go into that store, thank God, but I had a feeling we would be back another time. By the time we finished buying out the mall, it was too late to cook dinner, so I was elected to buy everyone their meal. I had a brainstorm and selected Annie's Pastas on South Biltanya Street in downtown Honolulu. I figured that I might find someone who spoke Italian there, or at least get directions to someone who did. I mean, let's face it, it was an Italian restaurant. No one was around that spoke Italian, but the owner promised to keep an ear open for a native speaker. He was 4th-generation Italian, and all his Italian-speaking relatives had long since departed this earth. But the food was good and Bella had pizza like all kids. For a little kid, Bella ate almost the whole thing. It was getting late when we left the restaurant. I think that before we reached the freeway H1, there were 2 sleeping people in the back seat, Bella and her new friend Alani. Shopping takes a lot out of you. Keanu and I unloaded all the bags into one of the spare bedrooms. Alani and I put Bella into the bedroom right next to mine. Alani picked out a pair of Disney pajamas for Bella and helped her get cleaned up and dressed for bed. After Keanu and Alani left for home, I decided to have a small drink before calling it a night. As I sat on my lanai watching the stars, I heard a small voice calling, "Poppy." I walked into the house and found a little girl huddled in a corner, softly crying. It broke my heart. I picked her up and carried her out to my chair. She cuddled up as she sat on my lap and soon was back to sleep. We spent the night in the lounge chair. Boy, was I stiff the next morning. Alani woke us up the next morning, wondering what we wanted for breakfast. I looked at Bella and said, "Manja, eat." She jumped up and grabbed Alani's hand and the two of them headed for the kitchen. Soon, I was served a cup of coffee by a very proud little girl. She chattered away to me as if I knew exactly what she was saying. I helped her set the coffee cup on the table so that we wouldn't get any spills. She stood there and watched me with the coffee. It took a few seconds before all the gray cells in my head realized that she was waiting for me to sip my coffee. I did, and with great exuberance, said Pareto. I was rewarded with an ear-to-ear grin. I noticed that Alani was standing in the doorway watching. She smiled at me and said, "Way to go, boss. Now go take a shower and get cleaned up while Bella and I prepare breakfast." One thing I learned at my mother's knee: obey all commands given by a female or you'll regret it. So I headed for my bathroom. As I was finishing dressing, a little voice said, "Papi, prima cena, breakfast." When I opened my bedroom door, there she was, waiting for me. She took my hand and escorted me to the kitchen. There I found the table set with my finest china. On closer examination, I noticed that the silverware was set in a very haphazard manner. I looked at the little one and gave her a big thumbs up. This time, along with my smile, I also got a hug. After breakfast, I got on the phone and started calling in favors and other forms of blackmail. I was looking for a translator. As much as Bella was growing on me, I knew that somewhere someone was looking for her. She was just too precious a little girl. I think I should stop for a second and tell you about my estate. When I bought the property, there was a small in-law house behind the main house. Since I didn't have any in-laws, I rented the house out to vacationers for monthly periods. My estate was in a gated compound with all the necessary security, so the rent was high. Because of the security, location, and the ridiculous rent I charged, I got people who were famous and wanted privacy. My current tenants were no exception. They arrived last night and I had yet to meet them. All I knew was they were husband and wife with a small child, and she was the main breadwinner with a job in national news. Bella and I were enjoying our breakfast when we heard, "Excuse me, could I borrow some milk for coffee and our Cheerios?" Now I knew that between renters we tossed out any leftover food. With the humidity, nothing lasted very long. I smiled at him and said, "No, but you guys must join us for breakfast. I know there is nothing to eat over there. Please join us, we have plenty of food and would love the company." After a few false starts, he agreed. He went back to the guest house for his wife and child. When they returned, we introduced ourselves and sat down to one of Alani's fabulous meals. Since I was ahead in the food department, I explained about Bella. My goal was to see if they knew any Italian speakers. They didn't, but our news anchor paid very close attention to my tale. We were even enjoying coffee from my cured coffee maker. Alani had brought out a selection of coffees, teas, and some hot chocolates for the kids. My guests had a good time inspecting all the choices. My house phone started ringing. Alani answered it and after a short chat, handed me the phone. "Good morning," I started in a very formal voice. "Please hold for the ambassador." Then they put me on hold. The next voice I heard was a very pleasant male with a slight Italian accent. "Mr. Douglas, I'm the ambassador to the United States for my government. I understand that you have found a child of one of our citizens." "Yes, sir, and I need some help with her." I went on to explain Bella's discovery and everything we had done so far to help her. He listened politely until I was finished, then asked if he could speak to her. I handed the phone to Bella. "Pronto," she began. For the next 30 minutes, she listened and occasionally replied with a C or some rapid Italian I couldn't quite translate. Finally, she handed me back the phone. The ambassador highlighted their talk. It seemed that Bella only knew of her life with her kidnappers. She did not know her mother or father, her real name, her age, or her birth date. She was kept chained in small rooms as she grew from an infant. Her food was put in metal bowls on the floor of whatever room she was kept in. She was never allowed out of her room, and was not allowed anything to wear but the shift I found her in. She was only ever called Girl. That was the only name she ever knew. The ambassador indicated he was sending a representative of his government to delve into her history. He also indicated that his people had checked me out, and it was decided that Bella would remain with me until her fate was determined. The ambassador's representative would be flying out in 3 days and would be staying with Bella at my home if that was agreeable. He said it was very agreeable to both Bella and me. I spent the next hour answering questions from everyone at the breakfast table. When they finally ran down, the chief of police showed up. I went through the morning's events with him. Somehow, it was decided that Bella needed a little girl's bed. Guess who was volunteered to buy one? Keanu brought the car around while Alani dressed Bella. Somehow, my renters were invited along to see the mall. I knew the husband didn't relish spending one of his vacation days shopping, so with very little effort, I talked him into spending the date at the golf course. We all fit into my Bentley with room to spare. I drove the car to the mall while Keanu dropped off the husband at the golf course. Bella recognized the mall, and when I explained that we were going to buy her a bed of her own, she cried tears of joy. She dragged me to the store where she saw the pink bedroom set yesterday. Now, Ala Moana Mall is a big place, but Bella navigated it to that store without a single error. When she grows up, she'll be one heck of a shopper. Bella didn't understand all the ins and outs of shopping, but she was learning fast. All she knew was that she wanted the pink bed and the great big teddy bear to go with it. I handed Alani my gold card and they left with the sales lady to pick out sheets, pillows, and all the other things Bella needed to establish her own room. Everything we purchased was to be delivered and set up by 5 p.m. that day. Bella would sleep in a real bed tonight, her own bed. We were a happy group, so we stopped at the food court for junk food and ice cream. Bella was overwhelmed. She had never seen anything like the food court. She wanted to try everything, but Alani put the kibosh on that idea. I guess I didn't mention that Alani was a health food addict. Junk food was not in her dictionary. Still, Bella managed to get some junk food. That kid could charm the socks off anyone. It was 3 p.m. when we arrived home and found a large furniture truck waiting for us. Bella's new bedroom had arrived. The movers had most of the items off the truck, and they were sitting in front of the garage waiting for us. Bella was so excited that she walked up to the biggest mover and started jabbering away in Italian. The two of them enter the house hand in hand, with Bella leading the way. She took him right to the bedroom next to mine and started pointing to the existing furniture.